Everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Aidan Kenny, for joining us. I'm gonna kick things off with a very basic question, but I think it's important for everyone to know what is an apprenticeship. Actually, let's start with who are you? Tell us a little bit more about you and your
Okay,
involvement in apprenticeships and the program.
excellent. And thank you, Talita, and thank you to all your guests for turning up today. It's a pleasure to be here. TU Dublin has been involved with apprenticeships for over 100 years. So we started off in the artisan movement back in the late 1800s, and Bolton Street was one of the main colleges that taught apprenticeships. So it's something that we've been involved with for a very, very long time, and it's something that we're very committed to. So I've been working originally it was called the Dublin Institute of Technology, but we became a university in 2019, and now we're called the Technological University Dublin. So I've been working here since 1996, I think, and I've been working in different areas in Bolton Street and DIT and TUD, and currently I'm head of apprenticeship in the School of Mechanical Engineering. Um, so we in TU Dublin are one of the biggest providers of apprenticeship in the country. Um, and apprenticeship, and by all means, just put up your hand at any stage and ask me any questions. I'm happy enough to be stopped, mid talk, and I can answer questions, because it's more about um, uh, giving answers to anything that you're thinking about. But apprenticeship in general, there's two main categories of apprenticeship. So one is what we call the designated trades, or the pre 2015 trades. So they'd be trades like plumbing, painting and decorating, motor mechanic, bricklaying, all of the electrical, all of the what people would consider apprenticeships. So there's 25 of them, and we still teach them in TUD. And then there's the new apprenticeship, the post 2015 apprenticeship. And these are called consortium apprentices. And there's about 70 of these type of apprenticeships, and they range from financial services to security to pharmaceutical. So there's different areas where new apprenticeships were developed. The big difference between the two is the standard-based apprenticeships um, last for 4 years. You get a national qualification that's placed at level 6 of our national framework of qualifications. But the new consortium apprenticeships, you can get a qualification from level 5, level 6, 7, 8, or 9, and so forth. So the new consortium apprenticeship, there's no restriction on the level of the qualification. So it can be a degree level, level 8, it can be a master's level, level 9, or a PhD level, level 10. And how they work is they work through a consortium with employers. So the employer leads that consortium, and then an education provider or training centre, they work with the employer, and they develop the curriculum and deliver the theoretical part of an apprenticeship. But going back to your question at the start, which was the important question, what is an apprenticeship? And I think that's key. That's the key thing, and it doesn't matter whether it's a craft apprenticeship or the consortium apprenticeship, they're both the same. So an apprenticeship is, one, a person must have an employment contract, and that's the key thing. So an apprenticeship is an employment contract. Under legislation, you have a guaranteed employment contract for the time and the duration of your apprenticeship. Two, while you're employed, you have a training and education component. So normally, we'll do averages. So averages, it's 50% of your time is spent in work, learning your apprenticeship. So you're learning by doing, by practice, and roughly 50% is in theory or in the education or training centre, learning all that theoretical side of your apprenticeship. Now, it does change. It can be 70% in work or it can be 60% in work. It just depends on the apprenticeship. Usually the apprenticeships are from 2 to 4 years. So the standard apprenticeship, the 25 designated apprenticeships, they're all 4 years in duration. But the new apprenticeships can be 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years. It depends. The consortiums set the standards and the curriculum and the duration. Do you get paid? So absolutely, you get paid while you're doing your apprenticeship because you're an employee. There's different rates that are agreed nationally for the craft-based or the designated trade areas. So depending on whether you're in construction or engineering or automotive, there's different nationally agreed rates. And each year then, so year one, you get paid a lesser amount. Year two, your salary goes up. Year three, it goes up again. And then year four, you're nearly at a qualified trade person's rate. So they're nationally agreed rates, and there's a few different rates for the different apprenticeships, but you do get paid. So you're earning and learning at the same time. And I think that's the unique thing about an apprenticeship, because you're in the workplace. And then you're also being supported by an education and training centre or a university to do your theory part of the apprenticeship. Is there examinations? Yes. I know some people don't like examinations, but the apprenticeship system is based on quality assurance and standards. So if someone is qualified, the customers have confidence that that person knows what they're doing. So that's why we have examinations throughout your apprenticeship. So they usually start in year 1, 2, 3, 4. You would have different types of examinations, both theory and practical. But you're well prepared beforehand because you've done the practice, the practical part in the workplace, and then the theoretical part you get supports in either the Education and Training Board or the university. And maybe just to explain that a bit more. So there's 2 education partners involved usually in apprenticeship. So the Education and Training Boards will take the first part of the apprenticeship, or what we would call for the standard-based apprenticeship, phase 2. So phase 2, you would go into an education and training board for 20 weeks, in some cases 22 weeks, and you would do your introduction to the practical part of your apprenticeship. You would begin the theory part of your apprenticeship, and then you do an assessment at the end of that phase 2. Once that happens, you go back to your employer for phase 3. So that's on the job learning. And there's a curriculum there for that the employer has to say, and they have to keep a record that you've done this task. If you were building a wall, you've used a certain type of brick, you've used a certain type of mortar, or if you're doing electrical work, you use a certain type of wiring and you've done a certain task. The same with plumbing. Then after that, you come back to the second education provider, which is either an institute of technology or a technological university, and you do what's called your phase 4. So your phase 4 is from 10 to 11 weeks. And that's where you really start getting into the theory part of your apprenticeship. So apprenticeships will have a level of mathematics, science, depending on which apprenticeship you go for. So phase 4, you really start going a bit deeper into the theory part of the apprenticeship, and you do a national examination. Um, Once you pass that examination, it's both theory and a practical examination. You move down into phase 5, and that's on the job again. So you're applying the skills that you've learned to the workplace, and you're learning by doing again. So you're bringing the knowledge from the education provider into your workplace. Um, I'm just checking if there's any questions there on the chat. I don't think so. Into your workplace.
Not yet,
Um,
I think.
okay. And if I'm talking too much,
No, it's okay. I'll ask you questions. Don't worry.
okay, okay. Um, so phase 5, yeah, you're back on the job, and that's fine. And then phase 6, then you're getting towards the end of your apprenticeship. So phase 6 is the final time you'll come back in to an institute of technology or a technological university, and you'll do 10 to 11 weeks, and you're kind of doing your advanced theory and advanced practice at that stage. So it's in the college. It's kind of intensive work. It's intensive theory. It's manageable. People, apprentices pass it, but you're really kind of going in depth into your area of apprenticeship and the knowledge. And once you finish phase 6, so you'll have a national exam at the end of phase 6, both theory and practical. Once you complete phase 6 successfully, you go back to the workplace and you do phase 7, and that's workplace learning. And when your 4 years are up, then you get the national certificate that's based at level 6 of the framework of qualifications. And that national certificate is recognized throughout Europe and internationally. So it's not just a national qualification in Ireland, it's recognized across Europe and internationally, in America, in Australia, and so forth. So it's a very valuable qualification for anybody that's interested in working abroad, or working across Europe. So there's opportunities there once you qualify. Um, for the consortium model, so that's the National Craft Apprenticeship, designates apprenticeship. For the consortium model, just important point. When you're in college and when you're in the education centre, so the 20 weeks in phase 2, the 10 weeks of phase 4, the 10 weeks of phase 6, do you get paid? Yes. So you're paid uh, through the National Training Fund, and that's managed by SOLAS. So SOLAS is the national agency that you have to register with. So when you're working with your employer, the employer pays you. When you come into training, you're paid from the National Training Fund. So you're getting paid while you're studying. And that's an important benefit, I think, to apprenticeships. Um, do you have to pay fees? And that's something that comes up. So a student that's doing a degree program or a master's program, so forth, you have to pay fees. Uh, does an apprentice pay fees when they come in to do the phase 4 and 6? Unfortunately, yes, you have to pay fees, but it's pro rata. So if you're doing 10 weeks, you pay 1/3 of the fees. So if it's 3,000 for a full-time student, you'd pay 1,000. And actually the minister last year got that reduced which was very welcomed by all apprentices, and I think it was 675 last year. So there is a cost, but it's not something that would stop someone from doing an apprenticeship, because again, you're getting paid while you're there, and you don't have to pay the whole fee in one piece. You can pay it over a period of time. Um, the consortium apprenticeship then is slightly different in that the model that you use, it's usually you do 4 days in your workplace, learning by doing, and 1 day uh, in the education or training centre to do your theory part. So it,
Aiden, can I just clarify something? So when you say consortium, that's the apprenticeships after 2015. Is that what you mean? Is the new
yes,
apprenticeship? So
yes,
the ones before would be more craft, so plumbing,
yes,
construction, and when you say consortium, that can be like accountant, technician, engineering, things like that. Is that like software development, marketing? Is that what you mean? Just to make sure everyone understands.
absolutely. You're absolutely right. So yeah, the craft apprenticeships, and that maybe that's a good term for them. So they're the 25 trade areas. So as I say, in construction, brickwork, carpentry and joinery, painting and decorating, electrical work, so all of the craft areas. And then the consortium is the new types of apprenticeship. So you're right. So insurance, accountancy, and so forth, um, logistics. So for the new apprenticeship, the model is just slightly different. It's 1 day with the education and training provider doing your theory part, and then all your practical learning by doing is in the workplace. Um, so that's the key difference in terms of the model between the two. Um, but your qualification from either one is a national qualification, and that's important. Um, the government has set up the National Apprenticeship Office. It's a new body that has been set up, and they look at all the apprenticeship system. They deal with any requests. So if we want to develop a new apprenticeship, say in something green skills or sustainability, or you know um, new types of energy efficiency areas, we would have to develop the curriculum with employers and then apply to the National Apprenticeship Office to have that apprenticeship approved. And that's a unique thing here, in that all apprenticeships are national qualifications,
Okay.
um, and they're offered across the country, um, where some other approaches across Europe, they would be maybe an industry sector qualification, um, or a regional qualification, where our approach here is that they're all national qualifications. Um,
Okay.
and I think that's served apprentices very well, because they're coming out where through a standard qualification system that's quality assured. It's a really high standard, um, and that is recognised across Europe. Yeah.
Okay. And about applying for the apprenticeship. So, because I think because there are two strong components there, like there's your
Yeah.
qualification and there's your job. So what comes first, or are they in parallel? Like, do you apply for the company first, or how does that work?
Excellent. That's a really, really good and important question. Um, so SOLAS is the national agency. And that is important, that one, the employer has to be registered with SOLAS as an apprenticeship provider. That's really important, um, because I've heard of cases where uh, people were offered employment as an apprentice, but because the employer wasn't registered with SOLAS, it wasn't actually a real apprentice. And at the end of the day, when the person was looking for their papers or, to prove that they done an apprenticeship, it, they couldn't prove it. So the employer has to be registered. So if you're thinking about becoming an apprentice and say you have an interest in, say plumbing, so you look for a company to get employed through first, because you have to have the employment contract, but you also check, is that company registered with SOLAS? And you can look up Generation Apprenticeship. So if you just type into the website Generation Apprenticeship, it will open up and you'll get all the information in there on the employer. So that's the first point. You have to have an employer, but check out that employer is registered with SOLAS. So point one, get employment. You write to the employer to say, I'd like to become an apprentice. Um, I have this background knowledge, or in school, this was the area I was really interested in. I see there's a question there. So, I'm a guidance counsellor in secondary school. I find it very hard to find apprenticeship unless students have contact with apprenticeship. Okay, I'll come back to that question in one minute. That's a good question. So, employment contract is first. Go to the employer. And then two, once you've gone to the employer and the employer has said, yes, we're interested in hiring apprentices, they normally do an interview. Yes, we're interested in employing you as an apprentice. The next thing that happens is it can be done by the employer. The employer can register you as an apprentice. So the big employers will do that. They have a lot of staff there, and they'll do that. Some of the small employers, you may have to register yourself. So you just contact SOLAS and say, I'm starting as an apprentice with company A, and I'm starting 2 weeks' time. I'm doing plumbing. And once you register them with SOLAS, they'll send you out an apprenticeship pack. And that sets out the apprenticeship that you're doing, and it gives you all the information that you need in relation to that apprenticeship. So, easiest way, one, employment first, and then registration with SOLAS second. And that's how an apprenticeship happens. So the question here is a good question. So it's saying that I'm organising a guidance counsellor in second level school. I find it very, very hard to find apprenticeships unless students have contact with an apprenticeship.ie. Doesn't have many, and I wonder advice. Okay, so there's a big campaign being organised by SOLAS and Generation Apprenticeship in order to promote the value and the status of apprenticeship nationally. And indeed, the European Commission has also a very large campaign across Europe called the European Alliance for Apprenticeship, and they're seeking to promote apprenticeship as a quality career path for young and older people. So apprenticeship isn't just for young people. Apprenticeship can be for anybody at any age, because at different stages in our life cycle, we may seem or seek to change employment, and apprenticeship may be an option. So we're in the framework of lifelong learning. You can become an apprenticeship at any age. But there is one part that you do have to think about. To become an apprentice, there is a minimum age. So you must be 16 years or over. So that's important. So in Ireland, you can't start an apprenticeship at 14 or 15. You must be at least 16, and you must have at least 5 days in your intermediate certificate, or so there is a qualifications requirement. Now, in many cases, that's hard. You may look at your leaving cert, as well. But there is a minimum qualification and a minimum age to become an apprenticeship. But the national campaign has been working and trying to work with second level schools and with guidance counsellors in second level schools, providing information on apprenticeship, organising talks in schools to explain apprenticeship, and they have a lot of good material. So if you look at Generation Apprenticeship on that website, there should be a lot of support material that can be used in schools for guidance counsellors, and it's worthwhile just sitting down if you have a son or a daughter and they're interested in maybe becoming an apprentice. Just sit down and look at that website with them and go through it, spend a bit of time looking at it, because it's got a lot of information, and the information has been developed to make it very accessible. And then, of course, you can contact Generation Apprenticeship if you have questions. They're happy to respond to any contact from the public. But I do think it's important because some research that we've done about apprenticeship, and we've asked, like, why did you become an apprentice? There's a very high percentage of people that become apprentices because either one of their parents, their mother or their father, or their, someone in the family, their brother and sister, were an apprentice. So there's that family kind of advice, or two, they have a friend who became an apprentice. And then the third area then is that they received advice about apprenticeship. But some people then found out about apprenticeship later on, and they can say, well, we'd never heard about this in their school, their second level school, and we only came across it by chance. So there is some work there, and the education providers with SOLAS, the National Agency and the National Apprenticeship Office, were seeking to develop materials and work in partnership to promote apprenticeship and provide accessible information. And just on accessible information, maybe it's worthwhile just talking. So we've talked about apprenticeship, we talked about the main apprenticeship system, but there is opportunities to get involved before you start an apprenticeship, and that's where you have either pre-apprenticeship courses or you have access to apprenticeship programs. So different technological universities have offer access to apprenticeship programs to mainly young people, so 16 to 24-year-old, who come in under specific categories. So there'll be younger people who are coming in under a category of, maybe you could say, disadvantaged. They've gone to a school that's classified as a disadvantaged school. Their parents, their annual earnings are below a certain threshold. So they can apply to register for the access to apprenticeship program. And the access to apprenticeship program, whether it's in Limerick or Athlone or Cork, through the Munster Technological University, or in Technological University Dublin, the access to apprenticeship program is a 12-week program, where those that register on the program, they get support in terms of developing their CVs, developing their employment interview skills. They get a taste of working in different apprenticeship areas, so plumbing, carpentry and joinery, brick and stone, electrical, and so forth. So they get a choice. They usually do between 2 and 3 days in with each trade area. So they get an idea of what's involved. And then they also get uh, a work placement with an employer. And these are very good employers. These are employers that are involved with the program and are trying to assist and provide opportunities uh, for young people, or particularly from disadvantaged or marginalized areas, to get access both to employment and to a career in an apprenticeship area. So they're very useful programs that allow, I'd say, 12 weeks to experience different apprenticeship areas through a formal structured program and gain work experience. Um, so I can send a link um, to the Access to Apprenticeship program, and you can have a look at that. It has the criteria to enroll, but it's not just offered in TUD, it's also offered, as I say, in Limerick and Cork as well. So it's a more national program. Also, the education and training boards, have a look at the education and training boards in your area. So if it was Laois and Offaly, there's an education and training board there. There's Dublin, Dunleary, there's 16 education and training boards throughout the country. So just look up your local education and training board, and they will have some information about apprenticeship, but pre-apprenticeship programs that, again, give you some insight and kind of basic knowledge about what's involved in working in an apprenticeship. So there's a lot of information out there, but I think the good places to go to get information are: one, Generation Apprenticeship, just type that in and you'll get a lot of information. Two, the education and training boards in your local area, and then three, the technological universities. So is the program only available to people 17 to 24? So the Access to Apprenticeship program, yes. So it's a specialized program that's only available to young people over 16 to 24 years of age.
But then there are other opportunities then through the
Absolutely. Yeah.
ETBs
Yeah. Yeah.
to get into an apprenticeship, for example. So the fetch courses, for example, would be a good way to get started as well, and learn more about a specific trade, for example, or career, and then go into apprenticeship after that, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the main apprenticeship programs, there's a minimum age. You have to be 16 or over, but there's no maximum age. So,
Yeah.
we would very often have people, sometimes in the 40s or 50s, they just want a career change. And they're at to be in the job all their life. But one person, for example, they were in a pharmacy, and they worked in a pharmacy for most of the career, but always had an interest in brick and stonework, but never, you know, really, explored their option. And then later on in their career, they decided to do an apprenticeship, and they were in their 40s at that time. Um, and they changed career, and they were quite successful. So you can start an apprenticeship at any age. Could you tell more about the specific criteria for participants, please? Um,
Just before we move on to that,
yep,
Aidan, just because
yep,
it's, I think, related to what we're talking about. So a lot of well, I think most of our participants that we invited here today, they are from a migrant background. They're
okay,
refugees,
yeah,
asylum seekers. So I
yeah,
think one of the key barriers that they'll face into getting into like an apprenticeship straight away would be like the leaving cert, for example. They won't have that.
okay,
They would
okay,
maybe have an equivalent, but then it could be difficult to translate that and get the equivalent here. So that is a big barrier. So would you say that the access to apprenticeship or those ETB courses could help with that if they don't have the equivalent to a leaving cert?
absolutely. No, there's also and it's very understandable that some people are coming, and they're coming from horrific situations around the world, and they're coming here for security and support, and absolutely welcome here. Um, but they come and they may not have documents. So some people are coming, and they were qualified previously, but because of the situation, they had to flee and seek safety and security, and they didn't bring documents with them. So there is a way of doing that. We have a recognition of prior learning system. It's called RPL, Recognition of Prior Learning. And any education and training board or institute of technology or technological university, they all have to have a recognition of prior learning officer there to assess someone's prior experience, knowledge, and qualifications. So that's an option, and that's available. So again, look up the Education and Training Board and the Technological University and look for recognition of prior learning, and you'll see the information on that. So what's the other barrier then? So if someone hadn't got the Leaving Cert or hadn't got their junior cert, uh, can they get access? Well, you can come in through a mature student, or you can go to an education and training board, and uh, you can do your leaving cert if you want. So you can do that through an education and training board. They have programs in that. You can do your junior cert that way as well. Um, but you would have to start that discussion. And my advice would be don't leave it, say, well, I haven't got the qualification to start. The education and training boards and the technological universities, they're there to help. They're publicly funded education and training providers. So they're there to provide assistance. So the main thing that I'd ask people to do and encourage people to do is to make contact and say, well, look, this is my situation, because we know that all the situations are quite different. Some people may have some of their information, some people have none of their information. Um, so they're there to help. Contact them, say, what can you do to help me? How can I get involved? Could a bachelor's be a bachelor's degree? That's yeah, level 8. You've got a really good degree there. So, um, yeah. So I suppose the minimum was the junior certificate, but if you've got a higher qualification, of course, that's going to be looked at. So I think the key area is to contact your local. I think that's the best bit of advice: to contact your local education training board first. They'll put you in contact with the person that's dealing with apprenticeship, or the person that's dealing with recognition of prior learning, and then have that conversation. Um, if someone, for example, doesn't feel confident in their level of English, um, again, there is language support services there. So contact the education and training board first, and they can give advice on where to go and get support on learning English. So that's there as well. And I stress the fact that these are publicly funded bodies, and they're there to help. So they're not profit-making bodies, they're publicly funded, and you're entitled to contact them, seek information and seek advice. So that's the first thing I would advise people to do. Um,
Great.
yeah, degree is, as I say, you have a degree, yeah, you're you can qualify to become an apprentice if you want. There's no, and that's uh, actually during the boom time, uh, there were cases where people who had qualified um, uh, in different areas like architecture or engineering, um, they decided to move to apprenticeship because there was more money to be made in that area. So there has been cases where people have moved across. Um, as you know, the boom time here was, it was up to 2008, and then we had the big
Yeah.
crash. But look, we got through that. So at the moment, um, it's really, there's really healthy employment right across the sector: construction, engineering, IT. You know, there's very good and strong employment right across all of the sectors for apprenticeship. Um, and the other thing about apprenticeship is, uh, once you qualify, you have that mobility that you can move across to different employers, because you know you proved that you're able to carry out the work to a very high standard within the workplace, and you have the theoretical knowledge uh, to carry out the work. Um, so it's an excellent kind of license to get work. So that's important. Now, in some areas, some trade areas, there's additional qualifications that come in for apprentices, where new things happen. So there's new things happen, say, in the green skills area, like solar panels and, you know, heat pumps. And that's where, say, electricians or plumbers who are qualified in their area, they do an additional qualification to learn about, well, how do I put in a solar panel? How do I put in a heat pump? You know, and there may be new apprenticeships starting in them areas. Because there's good companies out there, national companies, Board Gas, and companies like that. I won't go through them all, but they're looking at this area, and they're looking at renewable energies, and they're looking at the green economy, and they want to reduce the carbon footprint. So they want to develop new apprenticeships in these areas, and
Great.
the ESB and so forth. So there will be new apprenticeships coming on stream, and that's something, keep an eye on that. But the notifications will be sent out through the National Apprenticeships Office and Generation Apprenticeship.
Interesting. Interesting. That's yeah. I think a lot of people would be interested in those kind of green skills apprenticeships as well. So good to
Yeah,
know that there's some work behind the scenes being done there. So I think there was
absolutely.
another question here by Lydia about the criteria for participants. So I'm not 100% sure if she meant criteria to go straight into an apprenticeship or to apply for the access to apprenticeship program. But maybe you can cover a little bit of both.
Yeah. Okay. So I just maybe step back a small bit. So for any apprenticeship, whether it's access to apprenticeship or, you know, you're starting an apprenticeship program, you must be 16 years. So that's the absolute minimum age. Um, then the criteria, so you have to have a qualification, um, a minimum qualification to be considered. If you haven't got that qualification, the best place to start is with an education and training board, and they can give you the assistance there to get to your qualification. Um, and sorry, I don't see the question there for some reason. My screens that are moving on me. What
So the
did
question was, could you tell me more about the specific criteria for participants?
okay. Um, so for access to apprenticeship, so for all apprenticeship programs, the minimum criteria is 16 and 5D. D is in your junior certificates. Um, but for access to apprenticeship, someone is a BSc in agriculture, is it possible to get an apprenticeship in another sector? Okay, I'll come to that in a second. So for access to apprenticeship, because that program is a specialized program, and the target group for that program is disadvantaged young people, the criteria that you have to meet then is that you have to either come from a disadvantaged area, an area that's classified as a disadvantaged area, come from a group in society that's disadvantaged. Um, your parents, the total income, there's a threshold there. I think it's just over 47,000. I'll get the exact amount. I think that was slightly changed. But so there is criteria like that you have to meet in order to apply for the access to apprenticeship program. But as I say, that's a specialized program, um, and it's developed to encourage and allow young people from marginalized sectors get an opportunity um, to develop skills so that they can start hopefully in a quality apprenticeship program. But there is a separate program, so it's a 12-week standalone program. There's not a guaranteed apprenticeship at the end of that program, but it provides you with the background and knowledge in relation to apprenticeship so you can make an informed decision, and you have the employment skills in terms of interview skills and in terms of developing CVs and in terms of having done some work experience uh, to go and seek an apprenticeship. So that's quite specialised. For someone with a Bachelor of Science in an agriculture program, yes, that's fine. It's a Bachelor of Science, so any bachelor's degree is either level 7 or level 8. If it's an honours degree, it's level 8 of the Irish framework. If it's an ordinary degree, it's level 7 of the framework. Yep, that's fine. That you would fulfil the qualification. What I would say is that apprenticeships, particularly the craft-based apprenticeships, uh, have, uh, uh, you know, as part of their apprenticeship, they have a mathematics and science. Now, it is related to the area, so it's more applied mathematics and science. But my advice would be to brush up on mathematics and science, like for electrical or well, in any of the craft-based apprenticeships, mathematics and science would be part of it, but it'd be to level 6 of the national framework. And there's also, and maybe I didn't mention it. So when you go into your apprenticeship, the education provider, whether it's an education and training board or a technological university, have support services in place as well. So anybody that is dyslexic or anything like that, we have support services in place to facilitate that. So don't be put off if you have anything like that. Come in and talk to us. That's the main thing, and we can give you the accurate advice on that. But that shouldn't be a barrier. That shouldn't be a barrier for people.
On that note, Aidan, are there any bursaries, financial support for students for the access to apprenticeship program?
Yeah, there is bursaries in place. So the minister announced a new bursary actually for the travellers, and that's a €3,000 that's paid through the National Apprenticeship Office over 12 weeks. So it's usually paid in two instalments over the training. So there is bursaries in place there for access to apprenticeship program, and to encourage young people from marginalised groups to get involved in thinking about and engaged in that career path to be an apprentice. Just for example, and maybe I don't have bore colleagues, but my career path started as an apprentice. So if you looked at the criteria that's there at the moment, when I started off, I would have fulfilled that criteria because I came from inner city Dublin at the time, a long time ago. It was considered a disadvantaged area. There wasn't many people going to third level education or universities at the time. So I started as an apprentice. I went to where I work at the moment, Bolton Street. It was called at the time, the Dublin Institute of Technology, Bolton Street, and I studied my apprenticeship as a plasterer at the time. When I qualified, I became self-employed, and I ran my own business, but I always had an interest. And the Bolton Street, the teachers in Bolton Street, always encouraged us uh, to continue our studies. They said, "Okay, you're going to qualify as an apprentice. Yeah, you're doing great, but we run night courses. Why don't you do something else as well?" And I did, and I'd done some night courses, and I got the education bug, and I went back and done a degree and masters and PhD and so forth. So, but it started off, and my career path started off through vocational education as an apprentice, and I made a good living out of that. So that's why I'm very enthusiastic about apprenticeship. That's why I can see the benefits. I can see young people that are kind of maybe a bit fed up in school, and they want to use their hands and learn things and work, and apprenticeship allows you to do that. So another colleague of mine, his son kind of losing interest in school, started as an apprentice and qualified as an electrician, and now that person is working in Sweden. The company pays, the accommodation, and he's doing really well. So apprenticeship is not what I advise people to think of. You learn the trade and that particular knowledge and craft, but the opportunities for progression then are quite wide. So you can move into, you can become a site manager, or you can move into different areas through having that uh, training of applying practice and theory together or in the workplace. And with education, you learn kind of unique skills and a unique way about going about things, rather than if you just come from a theoretical background.
Absolutely. There was another question here, Aidan, that I think we skipped unintentionally, of course. So it was asked, I would like to become a pharmacy assistant with apprenticeship. Is that possible?
Okay, I'd have to check that out. I know pharmaceuticals on the bigger kind of chemical plants, there is an apprenticeship in that. Pharmacy, I will check that out, and I'll get back on to you. I'll send you that information because,
Right.
as I say, there's a list of over 77, I think, apprentices now. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'll check that out.
After the webinar today, I'll send that list to everyone who
Yeah,
registered, and I'll
perfect.
send, the websites like Solus and Generation Apprenticeship and all of that. So
Yeah.
there was another question here about if the apprenticeship is conducted online full-time, which cities? I think you've covered that. Well, a lot of the job will be done in person, I suppose. I think the classes are in
Yeah.
person as well. I
Mm.
think apprenticeships, they're like you said, they're national, right? So can be done basically anywhere. The
Yeah.
access to apprenticeship is only in a few cities, right? You mentioned Dublin, Limerick,
Dublin,
Cork, was
Cork.
that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Dublin, Limerick, Cork. Yeah.
Okay. Great. So I
Um,
think we only have a couple of minutes, and I wanted there was a lot of content, so I wanted to summarize that if we can. So
okay.
in general, so you have to be 16 and above for any of the opportunities discussed here today. If you are above 24 years old, then the Access to Apprenticeship program is not an option, but the ETB courses are. So I can
Yeah.
send that link to the Fetch courses as well to everyone,
Yeah.
so they're aware of those. And obviously directly to an apprenticeship as well. So the minimum requirement is that junior level. But then if you have anything above that, so a bachelor's, a master's, anything that will, obviously also count. So if you have that document to prove that you have a bachelor's degree from a different country, you can get that recognized here and then go
Yeah.
straight into apprenticeship because there's no age limit. Is all of
Yeah.
that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You should be employed at the National Apprenticeship Office. Yeah. So, uh,
I would
I,
love that. I think apprenticeships are great.
there's one other area, and it's a colleague uh, who's starting a new program in TUD. So Dominic Deland. He's the head of school, and he has an access program for catering. So it's in the catering and hospitality area. So that's an area just to look at as well. If someone is interested in that area, it's similar to access to apprenticeship, but it looks at the whole catering and hospitality area. And it's a similar structure. It's a 12-week program. Um, the similar, you get paid while you're doing that program. So if someone's interested in that area, fine. If they contact you and you let me know, I'll send you Dominic's number, because it's a new program that's just starting. And just to let you know, if there's anybody interested in that area, that's another area to explore.
Brilliant. No, I'm sure we have lots of people, maybe not even on the call today, but as part
Yes.
of our wider group that we support. So I'd love to speak to them and understand how that
Yes.
works and share information. So that is great, Aidan. Thank you so much. I think we're running out of time, so I think we can wrap up. That was super informative. If anyone has any additional questions, I'm going to send that follow-up email so you can reply to that, let me know, and I can sneak a few extra questions to Aidan if necessary.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you so
Look,
much, Aidan.
we're here
And
to help, and we're delighted to help, and thank you for organising this event today. Um, and my last bit of advice, ask, just contact your ETB or your TU. We're here to help, publicly funded, and we want to help. And apprenticeship is a quality career path. Okay, so thank
that's
you.
amazing. Thank you so much, Aidan, and thanks
Excellent.
everyone who joined today. Have a good day.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.
Bye bye.